We all know that feeling. You see a leader rise to power, someone loud, reckless, maybe even a little ridiculous, and you ask yourself, how is this happening? They make mistakes, they lie without shame, they oversimplify everything, and yet they win. Again and again, while the wise hesitate, the foolish charge ahead. And somehow they take the throne. It's not just politics. It's business, media, culture. The loudest voice in the room gets the microphone. The least qualified person is celebrated as a visionary. The true thinkers, the reflective minds, the ones who quietly carry depth and responsibility, are overlooked, mocked, or worse, silenced. And it starts to feel surreal. Like the world is upside down. Like we're stuck in a nightmare where intelligence is a handicap and ignorance is a crown. But what if I told you, it's not madness. It's not even accidental. It's design. There is a dark strategy at work, a pattern older than democracy itself. And centuries ago, one man exposed it for what it really is. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli. Most people misunderstand him. They think he was evil, ruthless, cold. But Machiavelli wasn't trying to corrupt the world. He was revealing how it already worked. When others dreamed about utopias, he stared straight into the chaos of real power, and what he saw was terrifyingly honest. In his book, The Prince, written during his political exile in 1513, Machiavelli laid out one of the harshest truths in human history. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Let that sink in. Power, he argued, does not belong to the most moral or the most intelligent or the most skilled. It belongs to the one who understands how to look powerful, not how to be wise, how to seem wise, not how to lead, but how to perform leadership. Perception is everything, reality is secondary. And here's the worst part. The crowd doesn't want truth. They want certainty, simplicity, a savior with answers that feel good, even if they're completely wrong. That's why history keeps repeating itself. From emperors to CEOs, from cult leaders to prime ministers, the pattern holds. The people who rise are not the wisest. They're the ones who mastered the art of seeming invincible. So when you watch someone climb the ladder who clearly has no depth, when you see brilliance passed over for confidence, when you feel that quiet frustration building inside because it seems like the world is ignoring its best minds, you're not imagining it. You're not crazy. You're just awake inside a system that rewards illusion more than insight. And Machiavelli saw this over 500 years ago. You see, before he became the father of modern political theory, Machiavelli was a respected diplomat in Florence. But when power changed hands, he was accused of conspiracy, tortured, and cast out. It was in exile, humiliated and broken, that he wrote, The Prince. Not as a dreamer, but as a survivor. He didn't write to inspire kings to be better. He wrote to show how they really rule behind closed doors. He pulled back the curtain, and behind it, he found a game. A brutal, psychological game where the rules favor boldness over thought, illusion over reality, loyalty over truth. And if you don't understand the rules, you will always lose. Not just in politics, in companies, in families, in friendships, in the very structure of society. Because the fool, if he appears confident enough, can always outshine the wise man who hesitates. And until you understand this game, until you recognize how it's been played against you, around you, and even through you, you will remain a pawn. But once you see it clearly, something shifts. The illusions begin to crumble. The crowd noise starts to make sense, and you realize the world has never rewarded truth. It rewards performance. Have you ever noticed that the wisest people you know, those who actually think before they speak, are often the ones left behind? They pause, they reflect, they ask questions instead of shouting answers, they weigh consequences before making decisions, and while they're doing all that, someone else is already halfway to the podium, smiling, shouting, and selling a vision, filled with empty promises. It seems unfair, doesn't it? But there's a reason for it. And once again, it goes back to what Machiavelli saw so clearly centuries ago. Power does not wait for those who hesitate. You see, real intelligence comes with a burden, the burden of awareness, awareness of uncertainty, awareness of complexity, awareness of one's own limitations. The truly wise know just how much they don't know, and that's where the curse lies, because in a world that craves certainty, not truth, not nuance, but certainty, the thoughtful are mistaken for weak, and the bold are crowned as leaders. Let's take an example the ancient world gave us, Socrates, arguably one of the greatest minds in human history. A man who devoted his life to asking questions, to exposing ignorance through dialogue. He was humble, he was reflective, and he famously said, "I know that I know nothing," but how did that end? Did the world applaud him, reward him with leadership? No. He was condemned, accused of corrupting the youth and sentenced to death by the very people he tried to enlighten. Now compare that to the demagogues of any age, past or present. They don't speak in riddles. They don't provoke thought. They scream certainty. They shout, "I alone can fix it." They promise, "Follow me, I have the answers," even if they have no plan, even if they have no wisdom. But here's the harsh truth. Certainty is seductive. It feels good. It gives the illusion of control. And in times of confusion, fear, or chaos, the loudest voice often sounds like the safest one, even if it's wrong, even if it's dangerous. This is what Machiavelli warned us about, that in the brutal arena of power, the traits that make someone good at understanding the world, reflection, caution, humility, are often the same traits that make them bad at seizing control of it. Because power doesn't care how deep your mind is. It cares how confident your performance looks. Let's look at the modern research. A study from the Journal of Applied Psychology found something deeply unsettling. Leadership effectiveness does increase with intelligence, but only to a point. After an IQ of around 120, that effectiveness starts to drop. Why? Because highly intelligent individuals often struggle to simplify their ideas. They use complex language. They introduce too many variables, and to the average person, they start to sound disconnected, confusing, arrogant even. Meanwhile, the fool, he speaks in absolutes. He repeats slogans. He cuts through the noise with a clear, simple message, and the crowd follows. Not because he's right, but because he's easy to understand. This is what psychologists call cognitive ease. Our brains are lazy by design. They like things that are easy to process, simple to digest. So when a confident speaker says something bold and clear, the mind grabs it and holds on, even if it's a lie, even if the person saying it has no idea what they're talking about. And here's the kicker. The truly intelligent, the ones who could actually lead us with depth and integrity, often step back. They see too many angles. They hesitate. They say things like, "It's complicated," or "I could be wrong." But those words don't win elections. They don't go viral. They don't grab attention in a world addicted to instant answers. So the wise are left behind, not because they aren't valuable, but because they aren't loud. And the fools rise, because they don't see the complexity, so they never stop to question it. As Machiavelli might have said, the crowd doesn't follow the one who sees the most. It follows the one who sounds the surest. And in that single shift, from understanding to illusion, from thoughtfulness to theater, the course of history can be changed. Not by the smartest man in the room, but by the one who acts like he is. What if I told you that the person who knows the least is often the one most convinced they know it all? It sounds absurd, but it's not just a theory. It's a scientifically proven glitch in human thinking, and it explains why the world often elevates the most confident, even when they're catastrophically wrong. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. In 1999, two psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, ran a series of experiments that revealed something disturbing. The less people know, the more they overestimate themselves. In short, incompetence breeds overconfidence, and What's even worse, the most skilled people tend to underestimate themselves because they see the complexity. They understand what they don't know. They're cautious, self-aware, doubtful. But in the battle for attention, caution doesn't sell. Confidence does. Think about that for a second. The person who should be most careful, who should pause and reflect, is the one who stays quiet, and the one who should be questioning everything. He's the one shouting into the megaphone. And the crowd? Cheers. Let's be brutally honest. People don't line up to hear someone say, "It depends." Let's look at the evidence. I could be wrong. No. They want a leader who says, "This is the way. I have the answer." Trust me, I know. Even when that leader has no idea what they're talking about, even when their solution is a fantasy built on sand, that's the danger. That's the illusion. And that's the secret weapon of the fool. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't question self. He doesn't even know how much he doesn't know. And that ignorance, combined with certainty, creates a psychological magnetism. Because in a world spinning with complexity, chaos, and fear, people don't want wisdom, they want relief. And confidence, even fake confidence, feels like relief. Let's go back to Shakespeare for a moment. He said it long before psychologists proved it. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. That single sentence describes our entire crisis of leadership. It's not about competence anymore. It's about the illusion of competence. Take a real-world example. Adam Neumann, founder of WeWork. He wasn't a financial genius. He wasn't a proven business strategist. But he had something even more powerful: unshakable self-belief. He walked into boardrooms like he owned the future. He pitched a company with a shaky model as a global revolution. He made investors believe that he was building not just offices, but a movement, a lifestyle, a new way for humanity to live, and they believed him for a while. WeWork was valued at nearly $47 billion, not because of what it was, but because of how he sold it. Because Adam Neumann didn't speak in doubts. He didn't show caution. He projected certainty. And certainty is magnetic, even when it's hollow. Eventually, of course, the truth came crashing down. The numbers didn't add up. The promises dissolved. The illusion cracked. But by then, he had already won, at least for a time. And that's the danger, because when overconfidence is celebrated, when charisma is mistaken for competence, the fool doesn't just survive, he thrives. And Machiavelli warned us about this too. He wrote that rulers don't need to be good. They only need to appear good. It's not about truth, it's about performance. And if you can project the illusion of strength, of wisdom, of certainty, then the masses will follow. Not because they're stupid, but because they're human. Because humans crave clarity more than truth. And fools are very, very good at pretending they have clarity. So the wise fall behind, second-guessing, calculating, doubting, while the fool climbs, unchecked. Not because he's better, but because he's louder. There's something tragic about watching brilliance go unnoticed, about watching someone with depth, wisdom, and integrity get outshined by someone with little more than a smile and a slogan. But this isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. Let's be honest, when we see a leader on stage, we don't see the inside of their mind. We see how they carry themselves, how they speak, how they make us feel. We see the performance, and the one who performs best wins. Even if they don't have a clue what they're doing. This is why so many people mistake charisma for competence. It's why a confident fool can become a billionaire, a prime minister, a cultural icon, while a humble genius stays invisible. We don't reward the deepest voice. We reward the most certain one. And in this warped theater of leadership, the loudest performer can lead thousands, even millions, off a cliff, and they'll cheer all the way down. It's horrifying, but it's also explainable. You see, the human brain is not designed for truth. It's designed for survival. And in our evolutionary past, survival often meant following the person who looked like they knew what to do, not the one who thought it through. Not the one who said, wait, let's reconsider. No, in danger, in chaos, in crisis, what we craved most was direction, and direction feels like confidence. So when a fool says, follow me, with fire in his voice, people don't hear foolishness. They hear certainty. They hear safety. It doesn't matter if the foundation is weak. It doesn't matter if the vision is flawed. If the delivery is strong enough, people will believe, even if what they believe is a lie. Let's talk about a more recent example, Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos. She promised to revolutionize blood testing. With a single drop, she claimed, you could get hundreds of accurate diagnostics. It sounded like science fiction, but she said it like it was fact. She wore the black turtleneck. She mimicked the tone of Steve Jobs. She walked into rooms filled with billionaires and sold them a dream. Not with data, not with technical explanations, but with conviction. And for a long time, it worked. Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Holmes was celebrated as a visionary until it all collapsed. The technology never worked. The science was never there. It was an illusion, driven by charisma, powered by performance. And this is not rare. This is not the exception. This is the pattern. Because the crowd doesn't follow proof. It follows the person who looks most sure of themselves. That's what Machiavelli understood before modern psychology. Even had the words for it. He knew that the appearance of ability matters more than the substance. And he warned us. A prince need not possess all the virtuous qualities, but he must certainly appear to possess them. This is why the fool keeps winning. Because in the marketplace of leadership, confidence is currency, and the price of doubt, irrelevance. Now, let's go one layer deeper. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who displayed higher levels of confidence, no matter their actual competence, were more likely to be chosen as leaders by their peers. Think about that. Even in a room full of smart people, the one who seemed more sure of themselves was elevated, regardless of whether they were right. That's not leadership. That's illusion management. And if the system keeps rewarding those who look the part, guess what happens? More people will play the part. They'll mimic the posture. They'll repeat the sound bites. They'll project certainty they don't have, because they've learned the hard truth. Reality is optional. Appearance is everything. So the real thinkers get buried under the noise. The quiet minds are called boring. The wise are labeled indecisive, and the fool becomes king. Not because he's the best, but because he looks like he is. And in a world ruled by optics, that's all it takes. Here's a question you may have never asked, but you've seen the answer all your life. Why do foolish leaders stay in power for so long? We watch them rise, on a wave of confidence, charm, or deceit. But once they're at the top, once their incompetence becomes impossible to ignore, we expect them to fall, and yet they don't. They stay. They dig in. They build castles of loyalty around themselves, not with bricks and stone, but with obedience. And inside these fortresses, they protect one thing above all else, themselves. Because here's the brutal truth. Machiavelli knew and wrote with chilling clarity. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him, and what happens when a fool sits on the throne. He doesn't invite the wise. He doesn't seek counsel from the brilliant. He doesn't surround himself with people who might challenge him. He gathers flatterers, yes men, echo chambers in human form. Not because it's strategic, but because it's safe. You see, a foolish leader knows, consciously or not, that a truly smart, competent, independent mind is a threat, someone who might expose the cracks, someone who sees the illusion for what it is, someone who, given enough time, might take the throne. And so, the fool protects his power the only way he knows how, by building an empire of mediocrity. He fills his circle with those who will never outshine him. He elevates the loyal, not the capable. He rewards silence over honesty, and he punishes brilliance because brilliance is dangerous. This is how institutionalized incompetence begins, slowly, quietly, and then, everywhere. The brilliant are pushed out, the obedient are promoted, and soon the system begins to rot, not from the outside, but from within. This isn't just theory, it's history. Let's take you back to ancient Rome. After the reign of the philosopher king, Marcus Aurelius came his son, Emperor Commodus. Unlike his father, Commodus was shallow, vain, and power-hungry. He replaced Rome's most capable administrators with performers, sycophants, and cowards, people who told him exactly what he wanted to hear. The result? Political collapse, economic chaos, and the slow, agonizing death of an empire that had lasted for centuries. One man, one foolish leader, one fortress of yes-men, and it all came crashing down. Fast forward to the 20th century, Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe. Mugabe purged talented economists, legal experts, and judges, replacing them with loyalists who knew nothing about governance, but everything about flattery. The result? Hyperinflation, starvation, a collapsed currency, an entire nation driven into ruin by one man's fear of being outshined. And here's the most chilling part. These patterns don't just appear in politics. They exist in corporations, in universities, in families, in religious institutions. Any place where power is centralized becomes vulnerable to the same sickness, because insecure leaders don't hire the best. They hire the safest, not the one who sees clearly, but the one who looks at them and says, "Yes, you're right." It's called competence threat theory. Psychologists have studied it for decades. It's simple. The more insecure the leader, the more threatened they feel by competence, not because they think the competent person is wrong, but because deep down, they know they're right, and that knowledge is terrifying. So instead of embracing talent, the fool isolates it, pushes it away, silences it, and surrounds himself with weaker versions of himself, until the entire structure becomes a hollow shell of what it could have been. This is how civilizations collapse, not in a single explosion, but in a slow, silent decay, where mediocrity becomes normal, where loyalty is valued over truth, where confidence outranks competence, where the fool doesn't just rise, he replicates, and Machiavelli saw it all coming. Not because he was cynical, but because he was honest. He didn't sugarcoat power. He didn't romanticize leadership. He exposed it, and what he revealed was simple, terrifying, and timeless. Fools build kingdoms of silence, and the wise, they either escape or are erased. By now, you've seen the pattern. A foolish leader rises. He protects himself with loyalty instead of talent. He silences the brilliant and empowers the mediocre. And soon, the damage spreads beyond the throne. It becomes a systemic disease, a rot that infects every part of the hierarchy beneath him, every office, every department, every decision. What starts as one fool at the top becomes a pyramid of failure built on obedience and fear. This is how institutionalized competence is born, not with a single bad choice, but with a culture that punishes excellence. And once it starts, it's incredibly hard to stop, because mediocrity doesn't challenge power, it protects it. Let's break this down. There's a concept in social psychology called homophily, the tendency of people to associate with others who are like them. Insecure leaders, especially foolish ones, don't want to be questioned. They don't want to feel small. So they subconsciously, sometimes intentionally, choose people who think like them, act like them, and most importantly, don't threaten them. And those people, they do the same when it's their turn to lead. This creates what researchers call a competence cascade, a domino effect where each layer of leadership becomes slightly weaker, slightly less capable, slightly more afraid of those below them. Until one day you look around and realize the smartest people are no longer in charge of anything. They're frustrated, they're boxed in, or they've already left. And who's left running the show? Yes, men. Echo chambers, people who learned how to play the game of don't stand out. This isn't just theory, it's happened. Repeatedly. Across history, industries, and ideologies. Let's revisit Rome for a second. After Commodus filled the empire with flatterers, what followed wasn't just collapse, it was generations of weak emperors selected not for vision, but for compliance. The same happened in the Soviet Union. Incompetent bureaucrats flourished in an environment that rewarded loyalty over performance. Disaster after disaster unfolded, not because of sabotage, but because no one dared tell the truth. And when the entire system is built on preserving illusion instead of pursuing progress, failure isn't just possible, it's guaranteed. Now take this into the corporate world. Some CEOs don't build strong executive teams. They build mirrors, reflections of their own ego. They don't want innovation. They want applause. And when the market shifts, when real decisions need to be made, those companies fold, not because of competition, but because of internal rot. The higher you go in a sick system, the more you're rewarded for playing along. Not for being right, not for being brilliant, but for staying silent. And the lower you go, the more you suffer for questioning anything. Brilliance becomes a liability. Creativity becomes rebellion. Truth becomes taboo. And slowly, the institution begins to suffocate under the weight of its own lies. This is what Machiavelli was warning us about. He wasn't just talking about kings and queens. He was talking about us. About how humans create systems that protect power instead of people. About how fear of being exposed leads to the destruction of entire civilizations. He saw it happen in Florence. He watched as politics became performance and merit was replaced by manipulation. He wrote The Prince not as a guide for the virtuous, but as a survival manual for those trapped in a world ruled by fools. And here's the worst part. Once a system is infected by foolish leadership, it replicates failure. The longer the fool stays in power, the more fools rise beneath him. And soon you're not fighting one man, you're fighting a machine, a culture where pretending is rewarded and thinking is punished, where questions are dangerous, where silence is safety, where mediocrity is policy, and the wise, they leave, or they break, or they fade into quiet corners, unseen, unheard, unvalued, because in a system that no longer recognizes truth, only illusion survives. You might be wondering, why does this keep happening? Why do we, again and again, choose the loudest voice over the wisest one? Why do we turn away from nuance and embrace simplicity, even when it destroys us? It's not just corruption. It's not just manipulation. It's something deeper. It's biology. You see, our brains weren't designed in modern cities. They were shaped in the wilderness, where survival meant speed, clarity, and split-second decisions. Back then, hesitation could mean death. Second-guessing could get your tribe killed. So evolution gave us a shortcut, a deep subconscious bias. Follow the one who looks most sure of themselves, not the one who's right, not the one who's, thoughtful, the one who seems certain and in a crisis. That instinct takes over. Our nervous system doesn't stop to verify facts. It scans for signals of authority, of dominance, of emotional control. And the person who projects those signals wins, even if they're completely wrong. This is called certainty bias. It's a cognitive distortion that leads us to overvalue confidence and undervalue doubt, and it explains why so many bad decisions in history felt good in the moment, because our minds craved relief, not truth. And the fool, he offers relief. He says, "It's not that complicated. I have the solution. Trust me. Everything will be fine." While the wise man, he says, "It's complex. There are trade-offs. We need to think this through." And that's not what frightened minds want to hear. We want black and white, not gray. We want heroes, not thinkers. We want simplicity, not complexity. And that's where the danger begins. Because the moment we start rewarding simplicity over substance, certainty over truth, the entire structure of leadership becomes a stage for illusion. Take something as serious as climate change. Real scientists speak with caution. They say things like, "There's a high probability." Multiple models suggest there are uncertainties, and what happens? They're ignored, they're mocked, they're too slow, too unsure, too complex. Then someone steps up and says, "It's all a hoax. Technology will fix everything. No sacrifice necessary." And that message, it spreads. Not because it's correct, but because it's easy. Because it gives people what they want, psychological comfort, and that comfort becomes dangerous. Because once we believe a simple lie, we stop listening to the complicated truth. This isn't about intelligence. Even smart people fall for this trap. A famous experiment from Yale University showed that highly educated participants, when shown complex data, didn't use their intelligence to find the truth. They used it to defend what they already believed. They twisted the numbers to protect their emotional comfort, not to understand the world better, but to stay safe in the illusion they had already chosen. This is how propaganda works. This is how manipulation spreads, not by tricking the stupid, but by giving everyone, even the intelligent, an emotional shortcut. A shortcut that bypasses doubt, bypasses logic, and replaces it with the only thing our ancient brains really crave in moments of fear: certainty. And the fool? He knows this. Whether by instinct or by design, he becomes the mirror of our deepest psychological vulnerability. He doesn't need to be right. He just needs to sound like he is. And so we follow him, even if the path leads to disaster, even if we ignore every warning sign, even if the whys are screaming in the background trying to wake us up. We follow him. Because we are wired to. Machiavelli understood this, long before neuroscience could explain it. He didn't write The Prince to tell rulers to be good. He wrote it to show how power actually works, how people actually behave, and what he exposed is this: power doesn't belong to the wisest. It belongs to the one who plays the role the crowd is most desperate to believe. And in times of fear, that role is always filled by the one who sounds the most certain, even if he's completely wrong. There's a comforting idea we like to believe. That good people rise, that honesty is rewarded, that the truth, no matter how long it takes, will always win. But history tells a darker story. Because in the brutal world of power, truth isn't a strength, it's often a weakness, and morality, real, unwavering morality, can be the most dangerous thing a leader can have. You see, Machiavelli didn't write for dreamers. He wrote for survivors, and one of his most chilling lines is this: "A prince must learn how not to be good." He wasn't saying you should always be evil. He was warning us, if you play by the rules in a world that rewards those who break them, you will lose. Because the game of power doesn't care how kind you are. It doesn't care how fair, how thoughtful, or how just. It only cares about one thing: control. And the ones who gain control, again and again, are not the saints. They are the ones willing to bend the truth, ignore the rules, and cross lines the moral refuse to touch. Let's look at two ancient examples, Cicero and Julius Caesar. Cicero believed in the Republic. He believed in reason, law, and ethical leadership. He spoke with brilliance. He fought for principles. And what happened? He was exiled, then assassinated. His severed head was nailed to the speaker's podium, the very place he once inspired Rome with his words. Now look at Caesar. He broke every rule. He defied the Senate. He crossed the Rubicon, an act of rebellion. So extreme it was considered treason. And what was his reward? He became dictator for life. He reshaped Rome forever. He was feared, admired, obeyed, until eventually he too was killed. But not before he changed the course of history. The lesson? In a world of wolves, the sheep are not honored. They're eaten. That sounds cruel. But it's reality. And this isn't just ancient history. Modern research shows that individuals with psychopathic traits, superficial charm, lack of empathy, and manipulativeness are overrepresented in senior leadership positions. Why? Because their lack of conscience gives them an edge. They make decisions without hesitation. They say what people want to hear. They're not weighed down by the ethical storms that torment wiser, kinder minds. Meanwhile, the ethical leader, they worry, they struggle, they burn out trying to do what's right, and in systems that reward speed, confidence, and ruthless clarity, the ethical mind is outpaced. This is what game theorists call the race to the bottom. If one player cheats and wins, everyone else feels pressure to cheat, just to stay in the game. And soon, cheating becomes the standard, not because good people disappeared, but because the system punished them. Over time, morality becomes a disadvantage, not because it's wrong, but because it slows you down in a race where only the boldest survive. And this is what Machiavelli tried to make us see. He wasn't glorifying cruelty. He was revealing a brutal landscape where virtue without strategy is suicide. Where being good is not enough. You must also be wise, strategic, prepared to face those who are unburdened by conscience. And if you're not, you'll be outplayed every time. So what do we do with this truth? Do we throw away morality? Do we become the monsters we're trying to defeat? No. We understand the rules. We stop pretending the game is fair. We stop expecting the world to reward goodness by default. And we learn to protect morality with power, not purity alone. Because goodness without strength is fragile. And in a world where illusion beats truth, charisma beats character, the wise must stop whispering. They must learn to speak louder, to appear strong, even when they are kind, to play the part without losing their soul. Machiavelli didn't celebrate evil. He warned the good. Don't bring a rose to a battlefield and expect to survive. Bring a strategy, bring a sword, and never forget, the truth deserves armor. You can be brilliant, you can be moral, you can even be both. But if the system you operate in rewards illusion over substance, loyalty over truth, and short-term wins over long-term wisdom, then you will lose. Not because you weren't good enough, but because the game wasn't designed for someone like you to win. And this is the final, brutal truth Machiavelli understood. The individual matters, but the system decides who survives. Let's look at the two extremes. In some environments, like surgery or engineering, you either succeed or your failure is instantly visible. You can't fake a successful heart transplant. You can't bluff your way through building a bridge. In those systems, incompetence is punished quickly. Feedback is immediate. Truth is unavoidable. And so, only the truly skilled rise, because reality doesn't negotiate. But now look at politics, finance, corporate boardrooms, social media influence. These are systems where accountability is blurry, results are delayed, and perception becomes the product. In those spaces, you can rise without being right. You can be wrong for years, as long as you look confident. You can fail repeatedly, as long as you blame others. You can create chaos, and still be celebrated for the illusion you maintain. This is how the 2008 financial crash happened. Powerful executives made reckless bets. They packaged lies as brilliance, and they were rewarded with bonuses right up until the collapse. Because the system didn't ask, "Is this right?" It asked, "Does this look successful?" And it collapsed, not from outside attack, but from internal rot. Sound familiar? It's the same pattern again and again. The same flaw Machiavelli wrote about 500 years ago. Because when systems reward loyalty over truth, illusion over competence, they don't just allow failure. They institutionalize it. And here's the twist. The longer these systems run on illusion, the more they suppress the people who could actually save them. Because real competence comes with uncomfortable truths, hard choices, slow progress, and systems infected by mediocrity can't tolerate discomfort. They push it out. So what rises instead? The charming, the safe, the predictable. People who say what the boss wants to hear. People who don't challenge the narrative. People who follow, not think. And soon these systems become echo chambers of emptiness, where the smartest voices have either left or gone silent, where the culture becomes allergic to change, where decline is inevitable. But no one says it out loud. Because no one dares. This is how empires fall. This is how great companies collapse. This is how governments rot. From the inside out, not with a bang, but with 1,000 silent compromises. And the most tragic part? Sometimes the fools don't even know they're fools. Because the system has trained them to believe they're doing well. Because the illusion is so thick, it becomes a mirror they can no longer see through. Machiavelli didn't just describe a broken world. He showed us how it breaks, not by accident but by design. Because unless a system is built to reward truth, to expose incompetence, to value long-term thinking over short-term applause, then it will always, eventually, be ruled by those who are best at pretending and those who can actually lead. They'll be dismissed, silenced, or worse, reshaped into something smaller just to survive. But here's the hope. Systems can be redesigned. Cultures can be rebuilt. We can create feedback loops that punish illusion and elevate insight. But it starts with recognizing the truth, and the truth is this. Competence doesn't win by default. It has to be defended by design, by culture, by courage, because if we don't protect it, we lose it, and the fools, they rise, not because they're strong, but because we let the system make them look that way. So here we are. At the end of a long, bitter road, one where wisdom falls and arrogance rises, where illusion is crowned and truth is silenced, where power doesn't flow to the capable, but to the confident, even if that confidence is built on air. You've seen this before. You've felt the frustration, watching the wrong people win. You've whispered to yourself, how did they get there? Now you know. It wasn't madness, it was design. A design carved into our psychology, our institutions, and our instincts. A design Machiavelli didn't invent, but merely revealed. Because this isn't just history. This is today. This is right now. Every time a wise person hesitates to speak, every time a thoughtful mind says, I could be wrong, the fool steps forward and says, I alone am right. And the world listens, not because the fool is better, but because the world has not been taught to tell the difference between truth and the performance of truth. So what do? How do you protect truth in a world that rewards illusion? You learn to see. You learn to pierce the mask. You learn to hear what's beneath the words. You become the person who can spot performance from substance, not because it's easy, but because your mind is trained. That's your defense. That's your rebellion. Critical. Thinking is the last weapon you have, and once you hold it, the game changes. Because when you no longer believe the illusion, you stop feeding it. You stop voting for it. You stop buying into it. You stop building systems that reward it. You start asking deeper questions. You start honoring the quiet minds. You start recognizing the value of uncertainty, humility, and doubt. The very things the world tells you are weak, but they're not weak. They're the foundations of real wisdom, the signs of someone who sees clearly, the marks of a leader who doesn't crave control, but understands responsibility. Because the truth is, anyone can wear the crown, but not everyone can carry its weight. The fool wants the throne. The wise know what it costs, and that difference, that quiet, invisible difference, it's everything. Machiavelli never told us to become monsters. He told us to wake up, to see the game for what it is. So we're no longer surprised when good people fall, when empires rot from within, when charm wins over character. Because only then can we build something better, something deeper, something real. But it starts with us, with every moment we question certainty, every time we reward thoughtfulness, every time we look past charisma and ask, but do they truly understand? It won't be easy. The world loves noise. The world worships performance. But if we want a future led by the wise, not the loud, then we must become the audience that can tell the difference. Because until we do, the fools will keep rising and the wise will keep falling. Not because they failed, but because we didn't see them, but now you've seen. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That is your power now. Use it.